when I first started, I knew I needed a waiver, but I didn't want to pay an attorney because I was already, well, I was thinking like a trainer. I'm thinking I need equipment. I don't need a lawyer. I don't need marketing. I don't need any, I just need equipment. Um, but so I just cut and pasted a waiver from the internet. So one, why do you need a waiver? And is a waiver that you take off the internet better than nothing? Hey, what's up, everybody? And welcome to Masters in Fitness Business Podcast, where you get to stand on the shoulders of giants. And today we have a giant coming to you from Houston, Texas. We have Shannon Montgomery, the lifting lawyer. She is an attorney, but she is also a figure competitor. Is it figure or bikini?
Bikini. Yep. I used to do figure. So
Okay, bikini. She is a bikini, high level, actually, bikini competitor. So she exists in both of those worlds. And Shannon is not your average lawyer. She doesn't work with your average clients. Shannon's passion is helping fitness entrepreneurs, content creators, and social media professionals. These unique fields require a unique approach and someone that understands these industries. This is what sets Shannon apart. So Shannon, welcome to the show. I'm glad. Thank you for taking the time.
no, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So you just recently did, I'm going to indulge my own curiosity here for a second. You just did a bikini competition in Phoenix. What show was that and how'd you do?
Well, I've done so many. I've done 3 national shows this year. So it was Muscle Contest USA's. That's what it was. MPC USA's. And I ended up in 4th place overall, which was actually a substantial improvement from, so I did Universe in Charleston, where I placed 16th. So I was in second call outs. I was that 16th spot. And then I moved all the way up to 4th at this last show. So yeah, I mean, it went well. Obviously I would have liked to win, but 4th out of a huge class. I'm always in the largest class. I'm that height. I'm 5, sometimes 5'3¼ sometimes 5'3½, whatever they feel like giving me that day. But my height class is usually the biggest because, we're that average female height. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself. It took me a while to kind of be proud because I'm hyper competitive. But I am excited and proud of what I was able to accomplish.
Of course you want to win. So is the top three get their pro card?
For that one, it was top 2.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So I was 2 spots out. And then the next show that I will be doing is North Americans. And it's just the 1st place finisher. So they all some of them award top 2, some of them are only 1st place. And then I know there's one where you have to win your class and then you have to place 1 through 4 out of the overall. So out of all the girls that won their classes. So that one's even more difficult to win your pro card. Yep.
Okay. Got it. All right. Awesome. I think that's really, really cool. And like I said, I don't know how you stay on that contest diet year round. I couldn't do it. I would be in prison for homicide. But let's get into the legal field. So we were talking before we started recording about what is the biggest hurdle for fit pros? There's 2 questions I want to tackle right off the bat. What is the biggest hurdle that fit pros have when it comes to protecting themselves from a legal standpoint? And 2, and I want to tackle this one first, what are the biggest reasons they need to protect themselves legally?
Okay. So biggest reasons, I would say is, one, I guess first and foremost, you're spending your time and effort and really, some cases putting your entire savings, risking everything to go into business as a fitness professional. And without having legal protections and without having that foundation, you risk losing all of it, whether it's to a lawsuit from a client or, from a competitor who you're infringing on some of their intellectual property rights. There are just so many different things that can happen. And of course, legal, we don't necessarily prevent those bad things from happening. We can to a degree, but then also we set you up for when those bad things do happen, you're going to be in a much better position to fight it, and to kind of make it out the other side than you would be without the legal help. Um, and really, I mean, just like anything else, you really need a foundation when you're starting a business. And there are a lot of different things that come with that. And legal should definitely be one of them. And, not to scare people, but it really can be the difference between a successful business and a failing business. So I would say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think your legal structure from like LLC to like C S corp, all of that stuff is, I think, part of that foundation.
Mhm.
But I know a lot of fit pros when they start out, they're like a one person show. They're just training people. They may be renting a space or working out of an existing club, and they're thinking, who's going to come after me? Why do I need to protect myself legally? And their operating budget is kind of bootstrapped. They're limited, so financially it's a burden for them to seek out attorneys, because traditional attorneys are very expensive. I remember I got a just a standard employee agreement, and it cost me almost $2,000.
Wow.
Crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. So I know it can be, and people see that and are like, there's no way I'm going to call a lawyer. But you need basic things like liability insurance,
Mhm.
waivers,
Mhm.
and contracts, right?
Yeah.
So you want to go over with the listeners the importance of that legal structure from a foundational standpoint, and also the waivers, because a lot of people, I think, are usually, and I've done this, cut and paste waivers from the internet. Same thing with contracts, of cut and paste contracts from the internet, thinking something is better than nothing.
Mhm.
And I want to know if that is actually the case.
Yeah.
So let's start with the legal structure, the LLC. What
Right.
is the importance of that?
Yeah. So your LLC, I would say, if you do nothing else, that is the best place to start, because an LLC is going to give you personal liability protection. And that is the biggest thing, because if someone does sue you, having an LLC in place will keep the person suing you from having access to your personal assets. So your personal bank account, I mean, your home, your car, all of those things. If you have an LLC, you're set up, and you actually are operating your business through your LLC, meaning you obtain a bank account under the LLC name. When you are using contracts, you're signing it under your LLC name, not your name personally. And you're really holding yourself out into the community as a structured business. You are going to get that protection from the court system. They're going to say, if someone gets injured on your watch, and like, let's say you're running a business out of your home, um, and someone gets injured, they sue you, a court isn't going to let that person come in and try to take your house from you, because you were set up, you had that structure in place. There are some businesses, for example, apparel. If you're starting an apparel company, you can probably get away operating as a sole proprietor for a little while before needing that structure. But when you're doing something like coaching, even if it's online and you're not handling people, face to face, there's still a lot more liability in that type of environment. And so, yes, getting an LLC and forming an LLC is actually pretty easy in most states. So I don't want people to think it's so, yeah, I mean, it's really not something that especially if you're a solo, if you have nobody else, you don't have partners, you don't have anyone else to worry about. If it's just you, a singular business owner, you can file an LLC with your state. It's usually very cost effective. I would say in California, it's a little more expensive, but most other states, it's not that expensive. You don't really have to file an operating agreement, because everyone always asks about that. Most states don't require that you file it. Do I think you need one? Yes, but you don't need to file it with the state. It's really filling out a little bit of a form, submitting it, and then there you go. You get your LLC. You can get your federal EIN number, and then you're kind of off, to the races. And the best part about that is it also helps you keep everything separate. So, and then I also think from a mental standpoint, it helps people realize that they are a business, and they treat themselves and they treat what they're doing as such. So people always come to me and they're like, well, I've been doing this for about 2 years now, and I think it's time to legitimize my business. And I'm very happy that you finally come to me after 2 years, but your business is legitimate from day one, and you need to set up that LLC from day one and treat yourself as a legitimate actual business. Even though it doesn't feel that way, you definitely are, and you will be better off because you're protecting yourself and your family by having that in place.
Yeah. And I want to backtrack just a little bit when you talked about the federal EIN number. You want to explain what that is and why you need that and how that protects your personal assets?
Yeah, so I'm not a tax attorney, and I don't even profess to know a single thing about taxes. But your EIN number is what the federal government essentially knows your business by. And you will not be able to get a bank account. You can't do anything without that EIN number. And it's your employer identification number, basically. If you hire employees or contractors, they need to know that number as well. And then that is how essentially the feds identify who you are, what taxes you're going to owe, and how you're going to pay taxes at the end of the year. And then, basically just the government, both state and federal level, will know who you are. And having that, if you don't have that, then you're kind of not really operating your business in the right way, and you can get in a lot of trouble. So you definitely want to apply. I mean, you don't have to, it's not like an application process, but you do submit your forms to the IRS, and then they supply the number for you, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. And then as you grow, once you get that LLC and your business revenue starts to grow, at what point do you want to start looking at becoming an S corp, and what is the benefit from a tax standpoint of becoming an S corp?
So S corps, again, I'm not an expert. I'm actually, my business isn't set up as an S corp, and I would say the biggest benefit to that is you just get a little bit more of a tax break. You can write different things off. So when you're an LLC, if you don't elect S corp status, you are basically, your taxes and your business taxes are all kind of just taxed as one. When you're an S corp, you're running it through, I don't know the best way to explain it, and I'm sure a tax attorney would do much better. But you have your business taxes that you pay through the S corp, and then as a personal or as an individual, you say, here's the money that my S corp paid me, and so then you have your individual taxes that way. But you get more tax breaks and more write-offs through the S corp scenario. I will say, when you do set up as an S corp, you then have to pay yourself like an employee of your business. So you'll be paying employer taxes basically throughout the year. So your tax liability, I guess, bill at the end of the year is less because you've already sort of been paying taxes throughout the year, as opposed to at the end of the year, you haven't paid any of those employer taxes, type taxes. And if you didn't set enough money aside, you could end up with a huge tax bill that you weren't necessarily anticipating. S corp sort of helps avoid some of that. But I always recommend working with a payroll company when you do elect the S corp status, because they handle all of that for you. And there's a lot of really cheap options out there that are, online, automatic type things. I know one of them is called Gusto, and I recommend that to a lot of my clients because they take care of all of the payroll stuff, and they even file your state and local quarterly taxes for you. So anyways, that's just an aside. But
And yeah. I agree. And my guy's Ivan. I call him my part-time CFO. And the reason he told me, like, if you're an LLC, it's a pass-through. So you get taxed on every bit of revenue that comes into your business.
Right.
After a certain income level, and I can't remember what it is, and I think it varies. It might vary from state to state. So you want to check with your accountant or your financial person. But after a certain point, then it makes sense from a tax liability standpoint to switch to an S corp, so that you don't get taxed on all of the revenue coming through your business. You can pay yourself a salary and only get tax on that salary. So
Right. Yeah.
you pay less taxes. But if you don't have that LLC, and if you don't have somebody on your team who knows accounting, then you don't know that and you miss out of that. You can wind up, paying a lot of money in taxes.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I do tell people, if you're not prepared to bring on a CPA or work with a CPA, or a tax professional in some capacity, then you need to be saving 25 to 30% of every penny that you make. I say sometimes even each transaction, save 30% of that, put it somewhere in a different bank account, because that is going to cover your taxes at the end of the year. But if you want to avoid paying, the max amount, there are plenty. The S corp is a structure that you can take advantage of, and you should, and you end up paying a lot less. So
Yeah, once you get above a certain income level, but like I said, I think it varies from state to state. So
yeah.
on that. So now let's tackle the waiver. So when I first started, I knew I needed a waiver, but I didn't want to pay an attorney because I was thinking like a trainer. I'm thinking I need equipment. I don't need a lawyer. I don't need marketing. I don't need I just need equipment. But so I just cut and pasted a waiver from the internet. So one, why do you need a waiver? And is a waiver that you take off the internet better than nothing?
Okay, so I will say better than nothing, yes, because at least it puts a minor barrier there. And the thing with waivers is they're not always going to be 100% enforceable or enforced, and that this varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction, not even just state to state, but county to county, depending on what happens and how those courts look at waivers and what they consider. But generally speaking, a waiver will, one, deter somebody from wanting to sue you because they've looked at the document and they've said, okay, I agree, I won't sue you for these things, I'm taking responsibility, fine.
And that includes catching COVID, correct?
Yes, yep. And then I guess the benefit of, well, so if you put together a waiver that you've pasted and copied and pasted off the internet, the issue with that is it might not necessarily apply to what it is that you do. And it might either actually put more liability on you than you meant to, or put too much liability onto the consumer, liability that you're not even allowed to necessarily put onto the consumer. So while it is better than nothing, you might end up with a document that the court literally looks at and says, there's nothing in this that we can uphold. So sorry, we're not going to reduce this person's damages, or, we're not going to do XYZ. And they're going to sue you for everything that you're worth. With an attorney drafted waiver, we can, aside from tailoring it to your specific situation, we can avoid those, pitfalls where you're trying to put something in there that you can't actually contract away, and make sure that it is going to cover you for all possible instances. There are a lot of things that, if you're new to the industry, or not even new to the industry, but you just haven't thought through every possible scenario, where a lot of times attorneys who work with waivers and draft those types of things, we understand, premises liability. So we get what that means if someone gets hurt on your property, and how to put that into a waiver to, keep you protected. But then also, just again, general disclaimer, waivers aren't foolproof. But you need to have them, just because it will, in 90% of the time, it will act as a deterrent, and then it will also help kind of reduce your liability, from a court standpoint, if you do end up in court one of these days, over an issue. So
Yeah, just make sure that your waiver is correct so that you have that first layer. If you can knock out 90% of your headaches before they happen, I mean, it's definitely worth it. So, and then I also want to tackle contracts, because I did the same thing with contracts. I copied and paste contracts before I had somebody draft up my own. But I know for me, the number one reason I wanted to have my own contracts drafted is because I wanted to get paid.
Mhm.
They signed a contract saying that they're going to pay this amount for services, and I wanted to be legal and binding and all of those things so I can get paid. But why else would you need a contract?
Well, a great reason, aside from being paid, which 100% of the time when someone comes to me and says, I've been working with this client for 3 months, they signed my contract, but that contract didn't have any stipulations as far as how payment would be handled. There's not a lot I can do in that case. So aside from making sure that you get paid, it also establishes, I like to say, the rules of the relationship. Because in a contract, you're going to put, what it is, you as the service provider, what are you doing? And then what are the expectations for the client? Are they checking in with you? Is there a cancellation policy? Can they get their money back from you at some point? Um, are you allowed to use their photos and their story to promote your business? Can you put it on your website? What is going to who's going to be kind of in charge of that? Are they signing up for a month to month thing, or is this something you want to obligate them 12 weeks, 8 at a time? So within your contract, you get to specify in detail the relationship, and then you present it to the consumer or your client. And if they sign it, that means they're going to be held to every single thing that's in that agreement. It starts your relationship off. I don't know why people are so afraid of contracts. I actually love them. I mean, I'm draft them all the time, so I guess that's part of why I love them. But just in general, when I'm going to do something, when I'm presented with a contract, it makes me feel so much more comfortable, because it lets me know that, okay, not only am I agreeing to all of these things, but this other person is also agreeing to all these things. They're agreeing to provide this service. They're agreeing that, X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And if this doesn't happen, then yeah, I can get my money back this way. So I think contracts really set you up from day one to have a very cordial and decent working relationship, because there's no question in either party's mind how things are going to go. And trust me when I tell you that the majority of people that I work with who did not have a contract in place, their issues are always around money. And you can avoid a lot of that by having it in the contract from day one. And then you don't have to have those awkward conversations and those awkward, oh, they put a stop on the payment and now I'm fighting PayPal. And because I've done that for clients too. I've had to fight PayPal and I've had to fight the banks. And the best way to do that is to show that you have a contract with this person. And then guess what? The bank sides with you every time.
Yeah, you can't go to the bank and says, "Well, he owes me the money."
Yep.
What says that, right? Yeah, you got to have the documentation, right?
Yep.
I agree,
Mm-hmm.
100%. So we covered LLC, S corp, waiver, contract. So with the waiver and the contract, I know after COVID we had to update both of those, to include COVID, right? So how often should Fit Pros be looking to upgrade or update their waivers or contracts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, at a minimum, every single year, whether that's if your whenever your fiscal year ends, or let's say you're one of those, January 1 type of people. So, or, wrapping things up in December, getting ready for the next year, 1,000% make sure you're going and looking at all of your contracts, looking at your waivers, looking at your website. Even, do you have a terms of service on your website that is, again, kind of like a contract? Look through all of those things and really take I say, an audit of where you're at, both from a legal perspective, business perspective, tax, all of those things. If you are somebody who is constantly, I would say, upgrading or updating the services that you're providing, let's say you start providing an actual physical good, things like that, then that's when you need to say, okay, now we're providing something new. Let's go ahead and look at our contracts. How do we need to incorporate this new product or service into those agreements to make sure that those things are covered? Because if you make changes, or if you structurally change your business, let's say you bring in a partner. So now you're a two-person LLC or you're a partnership and not even an LLC anymore, that's going to impact your contracts and that's going to impact your waivers. You need to make sure those things are updated. So I would say twice a year every quarter is great. Twice a year, moderate. And then once a year is when you're first starting out, maybe the first year, that's what you do. But really, as you're growing and getting bigger and doing more, I mean, quarterly, just like you would do anything else, like a health check. I mean, how often are you going to the doctor or the dentist or whatever the case is? You want to be regularly thinking about and checking on these things within your business.
Yeah. I'm just smiling or smirking because I'm thinking, okay, we're talking to Fit Pros. I don't think they're going to do it every quarter.
Yeah, I mean, time flies, I know,
Yeah,
but
time. Yeah.
maybe every 6 months, if you can think about it that way.
Your minimum, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you said, especially if your business is growing and you're adding services or something's changed fundamentally in your business, then you need to look at that for sure. I agree.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I know as a working in the fitness industry, working with fitness clients, things change all the time. People are taking advantage of new technologies or there's a new wave of something in the fitness space. People are like, oh, I want to jump on that trend. So things are always coming up and always changing. And it's important that you don't forget that client contract or that client waiver, and even contracts that you have as a business owner with other businesses. Maybe you're partnered with another business, or maybe you are an affiliate for a company or something. Maybe it's not your contract. Maybe it's a contract that someone gave you that you signed. It's totally fine to say, call up on that business or that third party, that vendor, whoever it is, and be like, hey, you know what? I want to review these contracts. I want to make sure that this is still an accurate reflection of the relationship that we have here, with my business and yours. So.
Okay. I agree. And then you mentioned something earlier. I want to go back. We were talking about the website terms of service, right? So can you go over that and why that's important for Fit Pros?
Yeah. So your website, I'm assuming at this point, although I guess some people operate solely from social media, but for the most part, I'm assuming most people have a website. And when that's really your first point of contact with a lot of potential clients. So a terms of service isn't necessarily legally required. Privacy policies kind of are. There's a lot of nuance there with that. A privacy policy is a great thing to have. Terms of service, while not legally required, if somebody can contact you through your website, if somebody can sign up for services through your website, if they can make a purchase for anything through your website, then the terms of service will dictate that sale or that relationship. So your terms are almost like a client contract. And we've all done it where you go to check out and it says, please click this box, accept our terms of service before making a purchase. That happens everywhere because that's what the law requires. The law wants to see that you, as the business owner, presented the consumer with these terms, and it can be minimal, but the terms are going to cover things like refunds. It's going to cover things like, what can you do if you have an issue, customer service, stuff like that. And then that way the consumer, whether they read them or not, doesn't matter. If they just click that they did, now they're bound by these terms of service. So again, it's another contract, and it isn't, they're enforced all the time in the court system, whether you can show proof that the person read it. So if you have somebody that signs up for a consult, maybe on your website, and it's a paid consult, and let's say they cancel 5 hours in advance and they decide they don't have to pay you. Well, if you have in your terms of service that they have to cancel 48 hours in advance or they lose their deposit, then you get to keep that money. If you don't have that in your terms, then you're probably going to be forking over, whatever deposit they paid or whatever amount of money. So the terms are an awesome thing to have. Again, is it legally required? No. But will it help a lot of times? Absolutely.
Okay, got it. And then you mentioned something when you said, other than terms of service, you were talking about
the privacy policy.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are, and in the coming years, I think they're going to become even more and more important, especially with how important our data is. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now at the federal level and different state levels, really looking at how our data is used and taken. And honestly, data is the most important thing in the world right now. As if you knew how much money people are making off of what you do on Instagram, it would blow your mind. So California is the only state that has an actual, well, I don't want to say only. California was leading the way, and I think they might be still one of the few states that actually requires, as a business, that you have a privacy policy on your website. You can get into a lot of trouble if you don't have it and all these different things. They do have thresholds. So if you're a business and you're only making X amount of money each year, they're not going to come after you. But that doesn't mean, that you shouldn't do it. So everyone's always like, well, I don't live in California, or I'm not a California business. Why does it matter? It matters because if someone in California ventures onto your website and you don't have this, you can still get in trouble. So a privacy policy is just the document on your site that tells the consumer how their data is used. A lot of times, most websites are only taking data that the consumer is inputting, like name, email address, phone number, whatever the case may be. But you still have to tell them that you're doing that. Even though they're the ones making the decision and they know exactly what information they're giving you, they still want it on the little document that says, hey, this is what information we take from you. This is how we use it. This is who we share it with. And things like IP addresses, that is automatically taken by a lot of websites. That would need to go in there. And then things like, I know we've all seen the cookie warnings, this site uses cookies. Those are up because of privacy laws, right? So cookies track what you're doing online. They're not bad, they're great. They help provide a better experience on that website. But marketers take that information to track your habits, and then they use it to sell you stuff. So you have to tell the consumer, hey, we're using these things. Even if you design your own website and you're like, I don't know what any of this means. Chances are, if you're doing Google AdSense or if you're tracking, any kind of SEO on your site is taking information from users, and you just have to be able to put that into a document to let them know what's being taken and how it's being used. So it can be, I would say for that, you do want to work with an attorney to get a privacy policy. And then your attorney might want to work with your web designer or developer if you're not the one doing it, just so that everything can be done accurately. But yeah, you definitely want to have that. And maybe in the beginning, it's something that you can kind of get away without for a little bit. But once you start seeing success, you want to have it on there just so you don't have, there's no reason for anybody to come and try and say, hey, this person doesn't have the privacy policy and I feel like my rights have been violated. So,
Okay. All right. Who knew, right?
a lot of people don't.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm glad that we got you on. So now let's talk. I want to jump into the higher level stuff. So say you're doing really well and you're thinking about opening a second location, right? So you have intellectual property that you need to protect, right? Whether that be like some catchphrase, your logo, that you want to get trademarked or registered or things like that. So can you walk the listeners through why you need to protect that if you're to protect your brand and your business?
Mhm. Okay, so trademarks is probably my favorite part of what I do. And I call it, like brand protection. So for starters, you should always think about when you are starting out with your intellectual property. So trademarks are your source identifiers. So those are like your slogans, your business name, your logos, anything that allows a consumer or customer to know, okay, that is coming from this company or this brand. those are trademarks. Your copyrights, because people do get this confused a lot, your copyrights are your actual individual content. So if you put out ebooks with exercise programs, if you have, let's say, a recipe book or something with healthy things that you sell to your clients. So those are copyrightable material. And then the name of whatever those are could potentially be a trademark. So you always want to make sure that whatever copyright or trademark you are embarking on creating isn't being used by somebody else, because if it is, then you are infringing on their rights. So you can't name your business the same thing as a business that already exists. The rules are they can't be the same or similar. So everyone thinks, oh, well, this is not the exact, or, well, I'm adding an S, so this is a little bit different. That's not how it works. If it's remotely close and could potentially be confusing to a regular consumer who knows nothing about you or the other business, it's too close. So from day one, try to be as unique as possible when it comes to naming your business and really branding yourself. And then as you're growing, you want to get federal trademark registration of all of these items, because that's how you make your money, right? I mean, you're attaching your service or your product to this name. And if you don't have federal trademark protection, let's say, for example, I'm here in Houston, Texas. Let's say I open a business. I open my own gym. I'm not creative, so I'm not going to think of a good name. This is a terrible trademark, but let's call it Shannon's Gym. That would never work as a trademark, but for purposes of this, we'll go with that. And I see this awesome success, and I'm like, you know what? I want to expand. I used to live in Florida. I'm going to move to a place in Florida. I move to the market over there. I open a Shannon's Gym. Well, let's say there's a guy in California. He opened a Shannon's Gym and he saw a ton of success too. And now he's in 5 different states and he has a federal trademark registration. But he started after you. Doesn't matter, because he got that federal trademark registration and you didn't. So while he can't stop you and he can't close you down from the 2 that you have opened, he can keep you from opening in any other place in the country, because now he has the federal registration and you didn't take the time to go get that. So we have common law rights, which is confusing, and we can get into that at some other point if people have questions on it. But the best thing for you to do is to get a federal trademark registration, because that gives you protection for your branding nationwide. And that will allow you to stop people who come up with a business that is similar to yours, sounds the same. That'll allow you to stop them from doing it. It will allow you to send the cease and desist. It will also keep you from getting the cease and desist, because you have your federal registration in place. It also, let's say you want to sell your business someday, or maybe you're looking for investors. When you are looking for investors or you go to sell your business, your IP is your business. And if you don't have those registrations, your IP is worth a lot less to an investor or to a future, buyer than it would be if it was registered, because you're just very limited on what you can do if you don't have a registration. So, I mean, I would say, as far as trademarks go, as soon as you're making money in your business, and even sooner, honestly, I would budget for having a trademark registration done, because it will just set you up, and it will avoid the costly rebrand that you might have to go through. And I mean, I've had clients who have had to rebrand 5 years in, and that you lose all of that goodwill that you built up. You lose that whole reputation because you've had to transition to a new name. And that is tough. I'm not saying it's not done all the time and it can't be done successfully, but it is hard. So if from day one you know that your name and your logos are good and you're excited about this business, and maybe you haven't proven 100% that it's going to work out, I would still secure those trademark rights as early as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know a good buddy of mine, Micah, he owned 2 clubs in Boston, and he wanted to take it to a franchise. He wanted to franchise it, but the existing name was, there were a million of them, right?
Yeah.
So then he had to come up with a new name and then rebrand and
Mm.
trademark that and then apply that to the franchise. And it, it added quite a bit of money to the costs of the franchise documents.
Yep. And then it also, I mean, it just, if you're an established brand within your community and you're having to change your name, you have to start basically from ground zero. Whereas if you have this brand and you're like, you want to expand, you want to franchise, you want to, that brand exists and you get to piggyback off of that for the new, the next locations, as opposed to basically starting from scratch. So it's, I mean, I think the trademarking is one of the more important aspects, and it gets overlooked almost 90% of the time because people think of it as sort of a frivolous, or, it's not, it's just your business name. Or a lot of times people do get confused and think that because they establish their LLC under a certain name, that now that means that name is protected. And those are two different things. So it gives you no protection in the name of your business other than within your state. No one can set up an LLC with that name, but somebody can open a store or whatever they want to under that name, no problem, because trademarks and LLCs are not the same thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, because you can have the LLC and still have a doing business as.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I feel like we covered the major ones. Did I miss anything that you feel like the listeners need to know about?
Um, I mean, I don't think so. I think from just a business standpoint, I mean, obviously there's a ton of stuff, but that's very case dependent and what kind of business you're running and all of that. But I mean, the main things are going to be make sure you have your corporate entity, make sure you're using waivers and contracts with every relationship, not just with your customers. Um, and then, yeah, oh yes, huge. Contractors, employees. Those are you need especially if you are working with people that you want to be an independent contractor so that you don't have to pay employment taxes. And just for other reasons too. I'm not saying that you're trying to get out of paying certain taxes, but if you really just want to work with contractors, you need to have an agreement in place because the way the states and the way the IRS view an independent contractor status is very dependent on what that agreement says and how you treat that person. So yeah, huge. You want to have agreements there. And then yeah, your intellectual property, making sure that when you're starting out, you're not infringing on somebody else's existing, brand names and branding, and protecting what you're creating is super important because otherwise what's even the point if you're not willing to protect the branding? What are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Everything needs your livelihood. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So let's tackle the cost problem.
Mm.
So we've covered LLCs, waivers, contracts, trademarks, intellectual property, terms of service, privacy agreements. All that costs money if you're going to hire an attorney to bring it up. So what are some of the options that Fit Pros have to fit within their budget, and how do they prioritize that?
Yeah.
They have
So, and I don't, okay. So when it comes to something, I will say, when it comes to something like a trademark, you really do need to work with an attorney on that because they are very nuanced. The application process is very nuanced. There's a lot of strategy basically that goes into obtaining a trademark. So if you're trying to prioritize like cost and whatnot, and you want to trademark your brand, work with an attorney that specializes in trademarking. And I'm not just saying that because that's something that I do. When it comes to contracts, there are awesome resources like LegalZoom. I would never suggest going through LegalZoom for things like a trademark, or for difficult things like a buy-sale agreement, or for something that really takes, hands-on analysis by an attorney. However, they do have a reputation for providing relatively strong, consumer contracts. So if you want to come up with a client services agreement, LegalZoom could be a really good option for you that is affordable, and that will provide you something that is, for the most part, going to be as legally sound as anything an attorney would draft you. And I know a few attorneys who work for LegalZoom, and they're great people. So I don't think it's a bad company by any stretch. I wouldn't go so far as to like get online and Google a form and then just pay $90 for the form. LegalZoom does have a little bit more of like an intake process where they really try to find out, what you need the form for. So those are good options. I also know attorneys pretty frequently have, what we call contract shops. So if you Google something like that, you can find an attorney in your state that might be offering template agreements. Again, it's going to be sort of a step down from actually working with an attorney, but you can get those at an affordable rate when you're first starting out, and you can see, okay, is this going to work? How long will this work for me? And it'll be substantially cheaper. The other thing I would say is, like, for me, I always get told that my rates are too low, but there are attorneys out there who are small, solo or small firms. So our overhead is just much lower, and we don't have to charge, the $2,000 for a document price point, because we don't have an office. I don't have an office. I mean, this is my house. I don't have employees. I don't have all of those things that I need to worry about that I build into my cost. So really, I'm just charging for my time, and my brain, the years that I've spent being an attorney. And so you can find cost-effective attorneys. I know one thing that I do for my clients is I try to flat fee everything, so they always know how much the project's going to cost, and it's not an hourly thing. A lot more attorneys are operating that way these days than on an hourly basis, because the hourly fee, while it works in certain scenarios, is a huge turnoff for a lot of people, because they get worried. I don't know, if I call this attorney, are they going to send me a bill for $300? Because that happens. But yeah, that part of it blows my mind. But yep, there are attorneys that do that. But I mean, I've been practicing on my own for 4 years, and I've never once billed somebody and been like, hey, by the way, you owe me this money. There are attorneys who will work with you on your budget, who will do things with you on a flat fee basis, and who you can sort of get with, especially in the beginning of your business life cycle, to say, okay, what makes sense? What should we spend money on now? What can we spend money on 6 months from now? How do we spread this out? How do we budget for this? So I think the first hurdle to get over is expecting the attorney to be, all of this work's going to cost me $10,000. You can find attorneys that will do things for you at a lower price point. You can also do things like LegalZoom, setting up your LLC. Again, I think that's something that you can almost do on your own. When it comes to drafting your operating agreement, or if there's, business partners, sure, that's when you want to maybe talk to your CPA, talk to an attorney, because there's more people involved. If it's just you and you're setting things up through your state, I think that's something that you can walk through on your own, because most states' Secretary of State websites tell you how to do everything. And I know that probably any attorney listening to this is like, I can't believe she's saying that. That's terrible advice. But if you're trying to be financially savvy, setting up your LLC, I have faith that you can do that on your own, at least from a filing standpoint, filing the documents, getting it done on the state. Sure, there are things that will come up that you might have questions for, but then at that point, you can go to the attorney and you can say, hey, I already did this much of the work. Do you mind helping me with this last little bit of it? So the rate that they're going to charge you will be way less, because they're not having to do all of that work. So those are just some of my tips, I would say.
Can you tell the listeners what your fee structure is?
It kind of depends, but let's say, for example, if you wanted a liability waiver, I typically charge a rate of like $400 flat fee for a waiver. And then if you were like, well, you know what, I kind of want to do a waiver and a client contract together, then I'll be like, okay, we'll bundle that pricing so it'll be a little bit lower than if you were to come at, 2 different times to get 2 different documents. So, and then also I've had clients who they were like, I don't know. I just want to be able to ask you questions. Do you have something for that? And I'm like, I can come up with a little, like a low monthly fee, and you can come to me with anything you have throughout the month. We'll talk about it. And then if you have a project that you actually want me to take action on, I'll give you a discount on that. So I try to work with all ranges of budgets. I offer payment plans, and I know a lot of attorneys that do that as well. I'm not trying to discount my work, but I am trying to ensure that small business owners have access to legal so that they don't run into the $30,000 problem down the road, and maybe can spend, let's say, one or two in the beginning, to avoid that bigger problem.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. And then I think that's everything. So, yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot left, but I
There
think
is,
basic,
but
right?
yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
got basics with a little extra. So now we get to my favorite part of the show is when we get to peek behind the curtain. That is Shannon Montgomery, aka the lifting lawyer. And I suggest you follow her. But so my first question is, what has been your most successful failure? And by that, I mean, at the time, it seemed like a devastating loss that you didn't think you were going to be able to recover from, but you were able to take life lessons from that and use those to propel you to greater success down the road.
That is a great question. Let's see. I lost my first big firm job, and I thought I would never work as a lawyer again, because I was working in bankruptcies and foreclosures, and we had one client was the loan servicer, and that client decided to take all of their work that they had been giving us in-house. And so my law firm no longer had a need for, I think there were 10 or 11 of us associates that worked on that client and only that client. They said, sorry, we don't need you guys anymore. They sat us all down in a room and they let us all go that day. And I thought, this is my first job, my first big job. I had had another job right before that, but this was very like soon out of law school. And I thought, that's it. I'll never work as a lawyer again, because who loses their first, major firm job? But I mean, because of that, I did take a little time off. I actually worked in a gym and I was a personal trainer for a little while while I tried to figure out what I was going to do with my life. But losing that job helped me realize that I could do it on my own, and that I could work with the kind of client that I wanted to work with, and I could work in the type of legal environment that I wanted to create for myself. So if I hadn't lost that job, I'd probably still be there, because it was a salary position. It was safe. I had an office to go to every day. And yeah, but I would not have taken the steps, after that to get to where I am here, where I can wear a tank top and sit in my home office, and have this conversation. So yeah, I mean, that was like the scariest thing that I'd ever, at that point in time, the scariest thing. I didn't think I would be able to rebound from it. And it's also the biggest blessing, that I'd had in my life. So
That's usually the case. And I like that. So you got the rug pulled out from underneath you. So you decided you were going to make your own rug that nobody could pull out from underneath you.
exactly. Yeah. I said, never again. It took me a little bit. I did go back to work for somebody else, so that I could save up and all of that, but with the understanding that I would go out on my own one day and not have to deal with that anymore. So.
Okay. I like that. And then my next question is, in your time in working in the fitness industry or in the fitness industry in general, whether it be, bikini, personal trainer, attorney, what has been the biggest surprise that you've had to deal with that you did not see coming?
Mm. That's a really good question. I feel like you can't surprise me anymore because now I'm just like, ugh, like, okay. um, I would say, I guess maybe from like the business side of it, working as an attorney with fitness professionals, and even as when I was working as a personal trainer and a coach and things like that, I think people's reluctance and their hesitancy to take action, um, for their benefit. So whether that's hiring an attorney or paying me to do the thing for them that I know is the right thing, or as a trainer telling somebody, hey, I worked with like general population people. I wasn't working with competitors or anything like that. I was literally working at an LA Fitness. Like that's about as general population as it gets. Me giving the client or person the skills and telling them like, okay, this is, if you do these things, this is going to improve your health. This is going to get you to where you want to be. And people's just sheer reluctance to just do it. So I've noticed that. I guess that's just a people thing because I've noticed it across the board. People are just, you tell them the information, you give them the skills, you give them the how. And even though I know it's for the good of them or their business, whatever it is, they're still so reluctant to just take that action that needs to be taken. And then sometimes I had a client email me on yesterday or Monday that was like, so we spoke a year ago. I'm like, oh, here you are. It took them a year to really decide, okay, she was right. I need to hire her for this thing. And here I am, so fine. If it takes you a year, okay. But I think that's probably my biggest surprise because I think in my head, I just thought I've always been a take action doer kind of person. And when someone gives me advice or tells me, okay, this is how you get from point A to point B, I usually am like, okay, I'm on it, with very little thinking. I'm just like, let's do this. So I was really surprised to find out, when I started working more closely with people, that not everybody has that mindset, and doesn't want to like do that thing right away. So
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like when you want it more than they want it for themselves, it can be
yes,
very like you're banging your head against the wall.
yeah.
Like, why am I doing this? Yeah, so I totally get that, but I think a lot of people are, and again, I'm speaking from personal experience, are kind of held back from fear, and
Yeah.
you have to work through that, whatever
Mhm.
demons or shadow they're dealing with. So, and
Yeah.
then sometimes they come back a year later. Like what do they say? What's the saying? When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So,
Yeah.
so I like that answer. Then my last question is, where do you go for your personal and professional development?
Oh, so I guess I spend a lot of time on professional development because we have to, as lawyers, we have to do continuing legal education. So CLEs is what we call them. And I usually get that through different associations that I'm part of, or even our bar. So I'm a member of the Florida bar and the California bar because that's where I'm licensed. And so our bar associations offer us like constant professional, learning and just everything. And then as far as personal goes, I don't spend enough time on that right now because I've been in this contest prep now for like 6 months ish. So if I'm not working, I'm thinking about that. But I do have a goal when I'm done with my contest prep here in the next week or so to start doing a little more personal development. I'm actually a pretty religious person. Well, I was raised Catholic. I don't necessarily say I'm Catholic, but I am a Christian. So I do turn to the Bible, and I do try to spend a little bit of time every day, at least kind of in that world, from a personal standpoint, to at least kind of to keep me grounded. And then, that usually will open up a lot of different things for me as far as things I need to work on and things I need to think about and think through. But yeah, once I'm out of this contest prep, I'll have much more brain space.
I don't know, running a business and doing contest prep. I mean, that's a lot because I know I did bodybuilding another lifetime ago. And when I was doing contest prep and carb cycling and all that stuff, I mean, that's how long ago it's been. I was carb cycling. That's how.
Hey, I like carb cycling.
Yeah, but like when I was on low carbs and I had to train, I was a zombie. I mean, think about like how to get home from the gym.
I know, I've been there, honestly, so tired, but it's all, it's part of the fun. So
I get it. I get it. So I wish you luck in your contest prep and in your development, whatever form that takes. So where can people get in touch with you, get more information, hire you, ask questions, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time on Instagram, and it is as nerdy as it is. I mean, I have two. It's Lifting Lawyer is the main one. I have my law firm one is Montgomery Law, PLLC, kind of a mouthful. But usually if you get at me on Lifting Lawyer, I will see your messages. My email is attached to that as well. And then my website is just montgomerypllc.com. And that's where I have a contact form on there if you want. I actually think my email address is just on there, so you can always just shoot me an email. I have an assistant that works with me part-time, but for the most part, I'm the one that's answering everything. And I'm pretty open and available. I love questions. I love when people just, want to talk to me about something. I do free consults. So if somebody just is like, you know what, I don't know if I need legal, I'm happy to say, I think you're fine for now, or no, like, I think you need to take action. So yeah, but I would say my website and then Instagram are probably the two best places to find me.
Awesome. And those links will be in the show notes. Just go to trainerjim.net, click on this episode of the podcast, and all the links to contact Shannon will be right there. So Shannon, thanks a lot for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and I would love to kind of put you on the team so I can tap you anytime, like some kind of legal issues. We want to address some legal issues on the show to have you on.
Let me know for sure. Happy to do it. Happy to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Well, have a good rest of your day. And again, good luck in your upcoming show.
Thanks. I'll be sure to post and let you know how I do.
Well, yeah, like I said, I follow you now, so I'll keep an eye out for it.
I'll be sure to keep everybody updated.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, thanks. Well, have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. You too. And good luck with the move.
Well, yeah, I'm in. I just gotta do everything. It hasn't been easy because I tore my tricep and I had it repaired like ago. So I'm trying to move with one arm, which is frustrating.
Well, good luck, and I hope that feels better soon.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Thanks.